My apologies for missing our time together last week, and I did miss it, but I'm back with another installment of H4, Heretics, Hypocrites, Hogwash, and Hope. Today we're going to explore a heretic that maybe you haven't heard of. There was something called the Great Schism and also the Protestant Reformation, both of these splits that happened in the Catholic Church. These splits eventually created the Protestant branch of Christianity, and the Methodist Church is part of that branch. We normally associate the Reformation with Martin Luther, and he was part of it, but he came after the heretic that we're going to talk about. His name is spelled Janhus. People pronounce his name Jan Hus, others pronounce it Jan Hus. But however you pronounce it, he was a heretic. Hus was born in what we now call the Czech Republic, then called Bohemia, in 1372. He went to school in Prague and pledged himself to the priesthood early in life. He was a gifted student and eventually got a master's degree, which was not very common in the 1390s when he attended the University of Prague, and he eventually was so well educated he became a teacher there. He read and studied and lectured about the writings of a guy named John Wycliffe. Wycliffe was an Oxford professor and philosopher that felt that the church should give up its worldly possessions and focus on the preaching of the gospel for all people. Well, Hus agreed with most of this and also felt that the church had gotten out of control, and he began to openly criticize the church. He began to preach publicly about these topics. One of these was that the church was actually making money from people. During Hus's lifetime, the Catholic Church owned more than half of the land in Bohemia. Crazy! They were also charging people to get to heaven, selling something called indulgences. Basically, you pay the church, you go to heaven. Otherwise, burn. Well, Hus didn't like this, and the church didn't like being outed either, so they came after him. Hus's story is long and very complicated, and there are many events that take place during his life that contribute to his end. A split in the Catholic Church creating a period with two popes, violent territorial disputes, political leadership takeovers, and jockeying for power. It was a confusing time to be alive. But Hus was focused on the goal. The gospel. He believed that the church should not be built on money and power, but on love and belief in Jesus. He continued to openly criticize the church, and in a move to try to supposedly bring unity back to the church, King Sigismund of Hungary invited Hus to a meeting, the Council of Constance, to tell and explain his views in order to find a solution to the split in the church. Needless to say, Hus was suspicious, but Sigismund promised him safety to and from the meeting. Well, you guessed it, that didn't happen, and he was imprisoned upon his arrival. By this time, he'd built up a group of enemies because he was trying to change the system of corruption. His trial consisted of 3 short hearings that only involved accusations against him of heresy. Still, he succeeded in disproving the charges against him, but in the end, it didn't matter, because those at the trial/council considered him a dangerous heretic, and the only way out for Hus was to take back all he had said and say he was wrong. Being true to his faith, he couldn't do it, and he didn't. Heresy was punished by death then, so he was burned at the stake on July 6, 1415. He died in defense of the church. He tried to help the church, but it's hard to change when you're feeling comfortable. Hus started a movement which was continued by Martin Luther and others about 100 years later, and there was some success. Of course, the church is now much changed since Hus lived. Hus was outspoken and spoke the truth and was condemned. But we don't have to be, and certainly we won't be put to death for doing that in the church now. But it's a time when the church needs to change again. We need the church to come back to the basics of love and care for each other that Jesus taught. And that brings us to our moment of hope for this episode. Think of something that the church needs to change. Decide what it is and speak up about it. Speak out about it. Change it, because together we can change the church and the world. See you next time.